The rain had just stopped. The sidewalk still shimmered under the streetlights, and inside a small neighborhood cafe, people sat with laptops, coffee cups, and lives quietly unfolding. This cafe was one of those places where nobody came to be seen, only to exist. Among them was Ethan Miller, 29 years old, software analyst, punctual, reserved, and, according to most people, mysteriously single. From the outside, Ethan's life looked complete. Stable job. Clean apartment. A routine that ran like clockwork. But documentaries aren't about appearances. They're about what hides underneath. Ethan came to this cafe every Wednesday at exactly 6:40 p.m. He always ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar. He always sat at the same corner table. And every Wednesday, without fail, she worked the register. Her name was Claire Reynolds. 27. Graduate student in communications. Worked evenings to pay rent. Warm smile. Curious eyes. The kind of person who remembered your order after hearing it once, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Their interactions were small. Almost forgettable. Usual, she'd ask. Yeah, Ethan would reply. A smile. A nod. Nothing more. Weeks turned into months. In documentary terms, this is what we call the silent build. No dramatic music. No confessions. Just repetition, until meaning forms. Claire noticed things about Ethan before she realized she was noticing him. He never checked his phone. He always tipped, even when service was slow. He smiled more with her than with anyone else. And Ethan noticed things too. The way Claire tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking. How her laugh came out unexpectedly loud. How she always asked, "How's your week been?" and waited for the answer. One evening, the cafe was unusually empty. Rain again. Finals week. The city exhaled slowly. Claire brought Ethan his coffee herself and lingered longer than usual. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching him type. "You're always working," she said lightly. Ethan smiled. Occupational hazard. She hesitated, then asked the question that would quietly change everything. "So, can I ask you something kind of personal?" Ethan looked up. "Sure." Claire shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Why don't you have a girlfriend?" The question landed softly, but directly. From the outside, Ethan didn't react much. He chuckled, shook his head slightly. "Guess I just haven't met the right person." That's the answer people give when the real one feels too risky. Claire nodded, accepting it at face value. She smiled, teased him. "Hard to believe. You seem like a good guy." She walked away, unaware that she had just asked a man to summarize months of unspoken feeling in one sentence, and he had chosen silence instead. What the camera doesn't show, what the narration must explain, is what happened inside Ethan. Because the truth was simple. He didn't have a girlfriend because every time he imagined one, the face was already taken. Claire's face. Ethan had promised himself long ago that he wouldn't cross certain lines. Dating someone who served you coffee. Risking awkwardness. Losing the one place that felt familiar and safe. So he stayed quiet. He listened to her talk about classes. He learned which days she was tired. He memorized the sound of her voice saying his name. And he told himself that liking someone quietly was better than losing them completely. That night, Ethan left the cafe earlier than usual. Claire watched him go, feeling an unexpected heaviness she couldn't explain. She told herself it was nothing. Just curiosity. Just conversation. But questions have a way of staying. As she wiped down the counter, she replayed his answer in her head. Haven't met the right person. Something about it didn't feel complete. Documentaries often pause here, not because nothing is happening, but because everything is. Two people. One question. One truth still hidden. And neither of them yet understands that the reason he doesn't have a girlfriend is standing on the other side of the counter. End of part 1. If you want, I can continue part 2 with emotional build-up, deeper conversations, subtle jealousy and realization. Still documentary style, realistic and clean. Just say, part 2, Blue Heart. After that Wednesday night, something between Ethan and Claire subtly changed. Ethan still came to the cafe. Same time. Same order. Same corner table. But now, he stayed a little less. Left a little earlier. As if proximity had suddenly become heavier than distance. Claire noticed. She told herself she was imagining it. But imagination doesn't explain why she kept glancing at the door every Wednesday at 6:40, waiting for him to arrive. Or why she felt disappointed when he didn't linger anymore. Or why his answer, "Haven't met the right person," kept echoing when the cafe was quiet. One evening, Claire finally broke the routine. Instead of calling out his order from behind the counter, she brought it to his table again. But this time, she didn't walk away. "So," she said, sitting across from him without asking, "you always work on Wednesdays?" Ethan looked up, surprised, but not unhappy. "Mostly," he replied. "It helps me think." She smiled. "You don't look like someone who needs help thinking." There was a pause. Comfortable. Slightly unfamiliar. This was new territory. In documentary terms, this moment would be marked as first unscripted interaction. They talked, not deeply, not dramatically, but honestly. About traffic. About how Seattle weather messed with people's moods. About how she hated oat milk but pretended to like it because customers kept asking for it. Ethan laughed more than he usually did. And Claire noticed that when he laughed, he leaned forward slightly, as if he didn't want the sound to travel too far. Over the next few weeks, these moments increased. Short conversations turned into longer ones. Claire began timing her breaks around Ethan's arrival. Ethan started ordering pastries he didn't really like, just to have an excuse to stay. Still, neither of them crossed the invisible line. Because both were afraid, but for different reasons. Claire was afraid of being wrong. She told herself Ethan was just friendly. Just polite. Just lonely. She'd seen this before, customers mistaking kindness for connection. She promised herself she wouldn't become a story someone else told as a misunderstanding. Ethan, on the other hand, was afraid of being right. Because if Claire was the reason he didn't have a girlfriend, then saying nothing meant losing time. But saying something meant risking everything. One Friday evening, the cafe hosted a small open mic night. Local musicians. Spoken word poetry. A handful of regulars clapping politely. Claire had invited Ethan without thinking too much about it. "You should stay," she said. "It's actually kind of fun." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. That night, they sat side by side instead of across from each other. Their shoulders didn't touch, but they were close enough to notice. A woman performed a poem about missed chances. About people waiting too long to say what mattered. Claire laughed quietly at one line, then went silent at the next. Ethan noticed her hands folded tightly in her lap. After the show, they walked outside together. The air was cold. The city hummed softly around them. "So," Claire said, hands in her jacket pockets, "do you ever regret not saying things?" Ethan stopped walking. This wasn't small talk. He thought carefully before answering. "Yeah," he said. "All the time." Claire nodded, staring at the street. "Me too." They stood there, under a flickering streetlight, both aware that this was one of those moments documentaries later describe as the turning point that didn't turn, yet. Because instead of saying what mattered, Claire smiled and said, "Well, I should get back." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, of course." They hugged, briefly, awkwardly, carefully. And when Claire walked away, Ethan stayed where he was, watching her until she disappeared into the building. That night, Claire lay awake longer than usual. She replayed everything. The conversations. The laughter. The way Ethan listened, not just to respond, but to understand. For the first time, a thought surfaced clearly. What if I'm the right person he hasn't met yet? Because he's afraid to say it. And across the city, in a quiet apartment, Ethan stared at his ceiling with a different realization. If I don't say something soon, she'll meet someone else. Documentaries don't rush moments like these. They let the silence speak. Because sometimes, the most powerful tension isn't between two people who don't care. It's between two people who care too much to risk it. The weeks after the open mic night felt different. Not warmer. Not colder. Just heavier. as if both Ethan and Claire were carrying something invisible between them, careful not to drop it. They still talked. They still smiled. But now every word had weight. Ethan rehearsed conversations in his head before entering the cafe. He planned sentences that started with "I've been meaning to tell you something," and ended with nothing at all. Claire, meanwhile, began noticing how much she noticed him. She caught herself scanning the room whenever the door opened, feeling oddly disappointed when it wasn't him, feeling oddly relieved when it was. Documentary narration would call this awareness, the moment when denial quietly steps aside. One Tuesday evening, Claire's coworker Maya leaned over the counter and nodded toward Ethan's table. "Your boyfriend's here early," Maya teased. Claire froze. "He's not." She stopped herself. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Not what?" "Not my boyfriend," Claire finished too quickly. Maya smiled knowingly. "Sure. But he looks at you like someone who wants to be." Claire brushed it off, laughed, changed the subject. But the seed had been planted. Later that night, Ethan overheard part of a conversation he wasn't meant to hear. Two customers near the counter were talking quietly. "Claire's cute," one said. "Yeah, she's going on a date Friday," the other replied. "She mentioned it earlier." Ethan's hands paused over his keyboard. A date. The word echoed louder than it should have. He told himself it didn't matter. He had no claim, no right to feel anything at all. And yet, something inside him tightened, the kind of feeling you don't notice until it's already there. When Claire brought his coffee, he looked up, searching her face. She looked normal, smiling, unaware. "Everything okay?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah. Just tired." This is where misunderstandings begin, not with lies, but with silence. That Friday, Claire dressed differently for work. Nothing dramatic, just slightly more effort. Ethan noticed immediately. His chest sank, though he told himself it was coincidence. People dressed up all the time. It meant nothing. Still, when Claire mentioned she was getting off early, he didn't ask why. And when Ethan left earlier than usual, Claire noticed that too. That night, Claire sat across from a man named Lucas at a downtown restaurant. He was kind, attentive, easy to talk to. On paper, he was everything people said she should want. And yet, she kept thinking about someone else. She found herself comparing. Lucas talked. Ethan listened. Lucas filled silences. Ethan respected them. Lucas asked about her plans. Ethan asked about her thoughts. Halfway through dinner, Claire realized something unsettling. She was smiling politely, but not genuinely. Later, as she walked home, her phone buzzed. A message from Maya. "How was the date?" Claire stared at the screen, then typed, "Fine." But fine wasn't the truth. Meanwhile, Ethan spent Friday night alone, replaying the week in fragments. The way Claire avoided his eyes earlier. The way she said goodbye quickly. The way he felt suddenly replaceable. By Sunday, both of them were unsettled, for different reasons, caused by the same distance. The next Wednesday, the cafe was crowded. Ethan arrived late. Claire was busy. They barely spoke. When they did, it was rushed. Surface level. And something fragile began to crack. After his coffee, Ethan stood, hesitated, then said, "Hey, Claire." She looked up. "Yeah." He opened his mouth, paused, closed it again. "Never mind," he said softly. "Have a good night." Claire watched him walk away, confusion blooming into frustration. For the first time, she felt hurt. Not because he owed her anything, but because she had hoped he'd say something. Anything. That night, Claire admitted something to herself she hadn't allowed before. She didn't want the safe option. She wanted the quiet one. And Ethan, lying awake once again, admitted his own truth. He wasn't afraid of rejection. He was afraid that he'd already waited too long. Documentaries often end part 3 here, not with resolution, but with realization. Because once two people understand what they want, the only thing left is deciding whether they're brave enough to reach for it. By the 4th week of avoidance, both Ethan and Claire were exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. The kind of tired that comes from holding back words until they begin to feel heavier than truth. The cafe, once their quiet middle ground, now felt unfamiliar. Claire noticed Ethan was no longer coming every Wednesday. When he did appear, he stayed only long enough to finish his coffee. No extra pastry. No lingering glance. No shared jokes. To anyone watching casually, nothing was wrong. But documentaries don't watch casually. They notice what disappears. One evening, after Ethan left without a word, Claire stepped into the back room and leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She was angry, at him, at herself, at the situation. And then, something unexpected happened. Maya followed her in. "You okay?" Maya asked gently. Claire hesitated. Then, for the first time, she said it out loud. "I think I messed something up." Maya waited. "There's this guy," Claire continued. "He comes in every week. We talk. Or, we used to." She paused. "I went on a date with someone else. And now it feels like I lost him without ever having him." Maya smiled softly. "Sounds like you care." Claire exhaled. "That's the problem." Across the city, Ethan was having a conversation of his own, though no one else was there. He stood in his apartment, staring at his reflection in the mirror, tie already loosened after work. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself. He had built an entire story in his head without ever checking if the other person was reading the same pages. That night, he made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a romantic movie moment. Just a simple choice. Stop guessing. The next Wednesday, Ethan arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. Claire was restocking cups when she saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Claire walked over, expression guarded but calm. "Hey," she said. "Hey," Ethan replied. A pause. This time, he didn't sit at his usual table. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. Claire nodded. "Sure. My break's in 5. Those 5 minutes stretched longer than any silence before. When Claire joined him outside, the evening air was cool. Traffic hummed softly. Life continued, unaware that something important was about to happen. They stood facing each other, unsure where to start. "I feel like I've been weird lately," Ethan said finally. Claire gave a small, honest laugh. "You're not the only one." Another pause. This was the moment documentaries replay in slow motion, not because it's dramatic, but because it's fragile. Ethan took a breath. "When you asked me why I don't have a girlfriend," he began, voice steady but quiet, "I didn't give you the real answer." Claire's expression shifted, curiosity mixing with caution. "The truth is," he continued, "I didn't want one. Not because I'm closed off, but because I was already invested." Claire swallowed. "In who?" she asked softly. Ethan met her eyes. "You." The city noise seemed to fade, not completely, but enough. Claire didn't speak right away. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was relieved. "I thought I imagined it," she admitted. "Then I thought I waited too long." "I thought you moved on," Ethan said. "When I heard about the date." Claire shook her head. "It wasn't what I wanted." They stood there, two people finally aligning their truths. No dramatic gestures. No grand promises. Just honesty. "I don't know where this goes," Claire said. "But I know I don't want to keep pretending it's nothing." Ethan nodded. "Same." A smile appeared, slow, real, unguarded. Documentaries often remind us that love doesn't start with certainty. It starts with courage. And on that sidewalk, outside a quiet cafe in Seattle, two people chose it. Not forever. Not yet. Just one honest step forward. After that night outside the cafe, Ethan and Claire didn't suddenly become a couple. There was no dramatic first date montage. No instant comfort. Instead, there was awareness. The kind that makes you notice how close someone stands. How long eye contact lasts. How silence no longer feels empty, but charged. They decided to take it slow. Not because they lacked interest, but because they respected the space between them. Their first date wasn't even called a date. They walked. Just that. A Saturday afternoon along the waterfront. Gray sky. Ferries moving slowly across the water. People passing by, unaware they were witnessing the start of something fragile and real. They talked about things they had avoided before. Why Ethan liked routine, it made him feel grounded. Why Claire worked in cafes, she liked listening to stories she wasn't part of yet. They laughed at the awkward parts. At how different this felt from everything else they'd experienced. I keep waiting for this to feel normal, Claire admitted. Ethan smiled. Me too. But I kind of like that it doesn't. Documentary narration would note this as adjustment, the phase where expectations quietly dissolve. At the cafe, things changed, but not dramatically. They kept boundaries. No favoritism. No public displays. Yet somehow, everything felt warmer. Ethan no longer rushed out. Claire no longer pretended she didn't care when he arrived. Maya noticed immediately. So, she said one evening, smirking, you finally figured it out. Claire smiled. We're figuring it out. But not everything was easy. Ethan struggled with vulnerability. Years of keeping feelings contained don't disappear overnight. Claire struggled with patience. She wanted reassurance, but didn't want to push. One night, after a long shift, Claire felt the familiar tug of doubt. They hadn't defined anything. No labels. No promises. Just consistency, and sometimes, consistency feels scarier than uncertainty. That night, she asked him, "Are you scared this won't work?" Ethan didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said honestly. "But I'm more scared of pretending it didn't matter." That answer stayed with her. Weeks passed. They learned each other in small, honest ways. How Ethan needed quiet after long days. How Claire processed emotions by talking them out. How both of them feared losing what they'd built before they could name it. Documentaries call this phase testing reality. Not dramatic enough for conflict. Not calm enough for peace. Then came the invitation. Claire was accepted into a short-term media project in another state, 3 months. A good opportunity. Temporary, but disruptive. She told Ethan over coffee. "I don't want you to feel like you have to wait," she said carefully. Ethan listened. This was the moment that revealed how far he'd come. "I don't feel trapped," he said. "I feel trusted." They didn't make promises they couldn't keep. They made a plan to stay honest. Some days were easy. Some weren't. Distance tested what attraction never could. But something steady remained. When Claire returned 3 months later, Ethan was waiting at the same cafe. Same time. Same table. But this time, when she walked in, he stood. And when they hugged, it wasn't careful. It was familiar. Documentaries often save conclusions for the end. But this part ends with something quieter. Not certainty. Commitment. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but shows up. Every week. Same place. Same choice. Months later, the cafe looks the same. Same counter. Same menu board. Same soft hum of conversation. To an outsider, nothing has changed. But for Ethan and Claire, this place now carries history. They no longer meet here by accident. They choose it. Ethan doesn't come only on Wednesdays anymore. Claire doesn't work every shift. Life has expanded beyond routines, but the cafe remains their reference point. The place where honesty began. Their relationship doesn't announce itself loudly. No constant social media updates. No exaggerated displays. Instead, it exists in details. In shared grocery lists. In late-night walks without destination. In knowing when to speak, and when to sit quietly beside each other. One evening, they sit at the same corner table where Ethan once worked alone. Claire watches him sip his coffee. "You know," she says, smiling, "I still think about that question I asked you." Ethan raises an eyebrow. "Which one?" "Why you didn't have a girlfriend." He exhales a quiet laugh. "Worst timed question of my life." "Or the best," she replies. They sit in silence for a moment. Documentary narration would slow here, not to dramatize, but to reflect. Because now, the answer is easy. Ethan turns to her. "I didn't say it then," he says, But I didn't have a girlfriend because I was already choosing someone, without knowing if I was allowed to. Claire nods. And I didn't know I was the reason, until I almost lost it. They don't regret the waiting. It taught them something. That love isn't always obvious in the moment. That timing isn't about perfection, it's about courage. That some connections grow quietly, until silence itself becomes meaningful. Life moves forward. Claire finishes her project and transitions into full-time media work. Ethan changes teams at his job, learning to disrupt his own routines. They don't promise forever in dramatic words. They promise effort. On one anniversary, unofficial, unmarked, they return to the cafe at closing time. The lights are dim. The city outside is calm. Claire takes Ethan's hand. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you never said anything? Ethan nods. All the time. And I think we would have lived fine lives, he says honestly. Just not this one. That's the kind of ending documentaries aim for. Not fireworks. Recognition. As they leave the cafe together, the narrator offers one final reflection. Some people don't avoid love because they're afraid of commitment. They avoid it because they've already found something worth protecting. And sometimes, the reason someone doesn't have a girlfriend is standing right in front of them, asking the wrong question at exactly the right time.